lovelies. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Decepticon Directive for the Transformers role-playing game. Now, if you watched my video on the Cobra book for the G.I. Joe role-playing game, this is pretty much the same, but for Decepticons. So the TLDR, or Too Long Didn't Listen, for this is that this completes the main book, right? In the same way that the Cobra book kind of completed the main book for the G.I. Joe RPG. Now, of course, Decepticons were never quite as cool as Cobra were, but still, they give it a good go. This is about 200 pages, full colour artwork, hardback, a nice little ribbon, which we like, you know, all the mod cons, everything that has become industry standard, even when not necessary, you might say. One has to wonder, though, given the poor treatment that the Power Rangers franchise is getting at the moment, whether other things are going to be shutting down from Hasbro as well soon. Power Rangers is being sort of semi-shuttered from the looks of it, or at least as a non-Power Rangers fan, that's the gist of what I've gathered from other people. So that kind of leaves you wondering whether these other licenses are going to keep going and whether they're going to be successful, or whether the wind will be knocked out of their sails as well, because there is a Power Rangers RPG as well that uses the same sort of system. Honestly, throughout this book, the Decepticons come off very sympathetic in a way that Cobra doesn't necessarily. There are aspects to Cobra that make them sympathetic, in that, you know, it tends to be second sons, people left behind, people who feel embittered because they've been poorly treated. That's who Cobra goes after. But the storyline behind the Decepticons here is that they are gladiators who revolted against the Primes, the leaders on Cybertron. Gladiators, workers from the lower levels of Cybertron, poorly treated, rising up against remote and aloof Primes to fight for their liberation and for equality. That's kind of the spin that's put on it. Whether that's true or not, I guess, is up to your campaign. This attitude makes them very sympathetic, but it's not particularly well represented in the available character options that there are. So you kind of have a dichotomy between the story thread and what you're presented with, because a lot of Decepticons are unambiguously evil, as you would expect from a Saturday morning cartoon, of course. Whereas the background definitely does paint them in a more sympathetic light. So you could run a Decepticon campaign in which you're playing them more as anti-heroes. But I guess the idea of a worker uprising being bad and everything is very much rooted in the 1980s, and so that makes sense given the origins of the cartoon and so on. And this does mostly draw, as the other books have in the series, on, you know, the original cartoon series, though you do see a lot more bots of various kinds. Character creation follows the same format as the main book. You come up with a concept, you determine your essence scores, you select your influences and your origin and your role, and then you finalize your character. There is nothing whatsoever to stop you from mixing and matching influences and options between the Decepticon book and the Autobot book. In fact, I think that will make more nuanced and effective characters, and the same goes for a lot of the supplementary material. Just because it's designed for Decepticons or just because it's designed for Autobots doesn't mean you can't mix and match. You might lose some of the characterization in the form of game rules, but I think it opens it out to be much more interesting. Some of them obviously will not, under any circumstances, fit the right tone for an Autobot, but yeah, you can kind of work around it and substitute things in and out as you need. Influences in the Decepticon book include extremist, fanatic, gutter champion, lackey, nemesis, recruiter, labourer, and traitor. So traitor is someone who's joined the Decepticon faction from a different faction. So they already kind of have that idea here. And similarly, you could have like turncoats joining the Autobots, like was it Skyfire? I can't remember. The one that was originally a Robotech toy, I think. Origins. We have some slightly different ones here. Armory, letting you turn into a weapon for someone else to use, in the way that Megatron did. We have Insecticons added. We have Minicons added, though maybe you want to make them USB sticks rather than cassettes. Alright, right? Monstrosities, salvaged, and of course many of the origins from the other books which are still applicable, but which maybe have some options swapped in and out. The roles are mostly the same, but they have alternate options to reflect a more Decepticon-y way of manifesting them and customizing them. There's plenty of armor, weapon and gear options, as well as new perks, again with the Decepticon emphasis, but a creative mind could easily apply most of these to Autobots as well, so it really does expand out your options. We also have some new forms of Energon and formal descriptions of those new types of Energon, and those give you ideas for perhaps how you could customize even more forms of Energon for your games and so on. Though, like an Energon cookie, basically, a snack, a Scooby snack for giant robots, contains one Energon, but it's really small. But an Energon cube, those big things from the cartoon, those only contain 2 Energon. So I'm not sure having the cubes makes as much sense as just having the cookies, because you could carry a bag full of cookies in the same space as you could carry an Energon cube. So I'm not quite sure what's going on there, but that seemed to make little sense. Unless Energon cubes are relatively unprocessed Energon and they have to have something done to them before you can ingest them. I don't know. I didn't get that sense reading it. Using those alternate forms of Energon can give you certain bonuses or penalties while it's in your system, and special Energon doesn't count towards your normal Energon reserve for some reason, though a Games Master might want to put a limit on how much of any special Energon you might allow to be held in their system. Sadly, because this is a book about playing an evil faction, there's some nonsense about safety tools, and it's not couched in if or when, but as sort of hard and fast commands to the people playing the game. Do not like. I think in most cases, if it's kids playing it, they're going to play at their own comfort level anyway, and if it's adults playing it, they're giant robots, so a bunch of stuff goes out the window anyway, and there shouldn't really be that much that you're that worried about. I mean, the film versions, which are more current, are a lot more bloodthirsty than the cartoon ever was, I suppose. It has what it calls having fun without crossing the lines, meaning character behaviour, violence, torture, real-world issues. It sets a sort of polite dinner conversation barrier around things, but considering how sensitive everyone seems to be these days, polite dinner conversation is never going to touch on anything interesting. So, yeah. Is it for kids? Or isn't it? Is it for old head fans who loved the original cartoon in the 80s? I think I said this in the Autobot, in the Transformers main book. Yeah, who's it for? And these kind of dichotomies really sort of bring that home again. The expansion on threats in the book is nice. It gives you a good variety of aliens to deal with, Sharkticons, various forms of both robotic and organic life. Quintessons were nice to see, some of the movie stuff. And we also get some Autobots, as that helps round out the roster from the main Transformers books. You get Transformers Autobots like RC, Bumblebee, Grimlock, Hot Rod, and so on. In my opinion, they still really need to do like a Decepticon and Autobot codex. Though I guess you kind of don't need it if you have access to Wikipedia, but I think it would be a nice object to have. Would be a complete, at time of publishing, index of every Autobot, every Decepticon, with their stats, with their descriptions from their data cards, and everything else, rather than doing this whole piecemeal thing. I think that would make shitloads of money, not only from people who play the RPG, but people who want a reference book, I think. There is an adventure, and you know how I feel about adventures in what are essentially core books, but the adventure is mercifully short. So moving on to scores then, I guess. Style-wise, it's a mixed bag. There's some great art, there's some not so great art, there's some stuff here and there that seems to have been scanned and then upscaled from VHS. The layout is fine, it's got subtly different colour language to differentiate it from the other books. So style-wise, I mean, I'd give it a high 3, just because it is kind of all over the place. But given the license and the money involved, probably, one would think they could be more consistent in terms of quality. Substance-wise, like the Cobra book, this basically completes the core book, and expands on the necessities from the core book, but minus all the system explanation stuff. So I give it a high 4, and this is an essential book if you want to complete your Transformers RPG collection. So that's 7 to 8 out of 10, depending, or a 3.5 to 4 out of 5, which is it's a solid entry. And like I say, if you're collecting the Transformers RPG, this one is absolutely essential. If you're not so heavily into your Transformers and you only bought the core book as like a vague kind of interest, then maybe less so. But it's a fine book in the line. It does complete the main book, and just like the Cobra book, that's what it does. It means you have a complete game, and that's worth quite a lot. Sang.
Hi, I'm Skip Breakfast, and you're watching Newsload. We're getting reports of a new card game which purports to make fun of the political and social hellscape in which we find ourselves, somehow turning this into a fun pastime for groups of slightly drunken friends to try and outdo each other. But there's one important question on everyone's lips: just how exactly do you play?